The cold iron bars bit into Darcy Reed's palms as she gripped them tightly, her knuckles turning white with frustration. The Fort Lyon jail cell was hardly bigger than a horse stall, and just as clean. Colorado Territory, 1871, was no place for a woman alone, especially one with empty pockets and no fixed address. "You'll face the judge tomorrow morning, miss," Sheriff Jenkins said, not unkindly, as he hung the large ring of keys back on the hook by his desk. "Vagrancy's not a hanging offense, but you'll likely get 30 days or a fine you can't pay." Darcy sank onto the thin straw mattress, fighting back tears. 3 days ago, she'd stepped off the stagecoach with her last dollar in her pocket and high hopes of finding work. Now, caught sleeping in the livery stable after the boarding house had turned her away, she faced a month behind bars. "I can work," she protested, her voice catching. "I just need a chance." The sheriff shrugged sympathetically. "That's for the judge to decide." Night fell over Fort Lyon, bringing with it the sounds of piano music and raucous laughter from the saloon down the street. Darcy wrapped the thin blanket around her shoulders, trying to find warmth in the drafty cell. At 22, she'd already endured more than her share of hardships orphaned at 16, working as a seamstress in Chicago until the Great Fire had taken everything. The westward journey was supposed to be her fresh start, not another dead end. Owen Hayes pulled his hat lower against the wind as he rode into Fort Lyon. The cattle drive had been successful, and now, with payment secured and his men paid, he was ready for a hot meal and a real bed at Mrs. Wilson's boarding house. At 30, Owen had built a respectable name for himself in the Colorado Territory. His small ranch 10 miles outside of town was starting to turn a profit, and he was known as a fair man who paid his debts and kept his word. The main street was quiet as he dismounted in front of the sheriff's office, intent on greeting his old friend Jenkins before seeking out a meal. The lawman had been instrumental in helping Owen establish his ranch 3 years prior, steering him away from unscrupulous land dealers and offering sage advice. "Evening, Sheriff," Owen called as he entered the office, stomping trail dust from his boots. Jenkins looked up from his paperwork with a tired smile. "Owen Hayes, back from your drive already. Must have gone well." "Can't complain," Owen replied, settling his tall frame into a chair across from the desk. "Cattle prices are holding steady, might even add to my herd come spring." He glanced toward the cells, surprised to see a figure huddled in the corner of one. "Business has been good for you too, I see." The sheriff followed his gaze and sighed. "Young woman caught sleeping in Whitaker's stable. No money, no kin, no prospects. Judge'll see her tomorrow." "A woman." Owen frowned, rising to his feet to get a better look. As he approached the cell, Darcy raised her head, her green eyes flashing with a mixture of defiance and humiliation. Even with her chestnut hair tangled and her dress wrinkled, there was a quiet dignity to her bearing that gave Owen pause. "Miss," he nodded politely, removing his hat. "Come to gawk at the criminal?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "Owen's no gawker," Jenkins interjected. "One of the few decent men in these parts." Owen studied her thoughtfully. Good hands, he noted, not the soft hands of a saloon girl but capable looking. Proud posture despite her circumstances. Clear eyes that met his without flinching. "What's the charge exactly?" he asked, turning back to Jenkins. "Vagrancy. Judge'll fine her $5 or 30 days. $5. The amount seemed trivial after the profits from his cattle sale, yet he knew it might as well be 500 to someone without a penny to their name. And if someone were to pay her fine, Owen inquired. Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "Then she'd be free to go." "Though where she'd go is another matter." Darcy stood up, approaching the bars. "I don't accept charity, sir, And I don't know what you might expect in return, but a ranch hand, Owen interrupted. That's what I expect. I'm short-staffed and winter's coming. Can you cook? Yes, she answered cautiously. Mend clothes, tend a garden. I worked as a seamstress in Chicago, and my mother taught me gardening before she passed. Owen nodded, decision made. Sheriff, I'll pay the lady's fine in the morning, and I'm offering you a job, Miss Reed, Darcy Reed. She eyed him warily. What sort of job exactly, Mr. Hayes? Housekeeper for my ranch. Room, board, and fair wages. 3 months trial, and if it doesn't suit either of us, I'll pay your stage fare to Denver. Darcy's eyes narrowed with suspicion. That's very generous for someone you've just met in a jail cell. Owen shrugged. I'm a good judge of character. Besides, my last housekeeper left to marry a minor 2 months ago. I've been living on my own cooking since, and I'm about ready to shoot myself. Despite herself, Darcy's lips twitched with the ghost of a smile. Your cooking can't be that bad. My dog won't even eat it, Owen deadpanned, which drew a reluctant laugh from her. Sheriff Jenkins watched the exchange with interest. Owen's offer is fair, Miss Reed. He's got a solid reputation around these parts. Wouldn't steer you wrong. Darcy studied the cowboy carefully. There was nothing in his steady blue eyes that suggested ulterior motives, though she'd learned the hard way that men weren't always what they seemed. Still, the prospect of a job and shelter was better than jail or destitution. I accept your offer, Mr. Hayes, she said finally. Though I warn you, I'll leave at the first sign of impropriety. Owen nodded solemnly. I'd expect nothing less, Miss Reed. I'll return in the morning to settle matters with the judge. As promised, Owen appeared at the jailhouse early the next day, his $5 securing Darcy's release with minimal fuss from the circuit judge. She emerged from the cell with her single carpet bag, her chin held high despite the judgmental stares from the clerk and deputy. Thank you, she said stiffly, once they were outside. I'll repay the fine from my wages. Owen helped her onto his wagon, loaded with supplies for the ranch. We can discuss that later. Are you hungry? At the mention of food, Darcy's stomach growled traitorously. She hadn't eaten since the previous morning. Mrs. Wilson's boarding house serves a decent breakfast, he suggested, climbing up beside her. We can get some food before heading out to the ranch. The boarding house was warm and smelled of fresh bread and coffee. Mrs. Wilson, a plump woman in her 50s, greeted Owen like a son but eyed Darcy with open curiosity. New ranch hand, Owen explained simply, pulling out a chair for Darcy at a corner table. Mrs. Wilson's johnnycakes are the best in the territory, he added to Darcy. Throughout breakfast, Darcy was acutely aware of the sidelong glances from other patrons. A woman traveling alone with a man who wasn't her husband or brother was cause for gossip, especially one who'd spent the night in jail. People will talk, she murmured, sipping her coffee. Owen shrugged, unconcerned. People always do. The ranch is far enough from town that you won't have to worry about wagging tongues. My foreman and 2 hands live in the bunkhouse, but they're good men. The house is yours to manage as you see fit. Darcy nodded, still cautious but increasingly reassured by his straightforward manner. And my duties, cooking, cleaning, mending, the usual household tasks. The men and I handle the ranch work, though if you're inclined to help with the chickens or garden, I wouldn't object. It sounded reasonable, almost too reasonable. And my quarters. There's a bedroom off the kitchen. Small but private. Used to be the original cabin before I built the main house. By the time they'd finished breakfast and loaded the last of the supplies, Darcy had begun to feel a tentative sense of hope. As the wagon left Fort Lyon behind, the vast Colorado landscape spread before them, rolling prairie dotted with stands of cottonwood trees and distant mountains that seemed to touch the sky. "It's beautiful," she breathed, the openness of the land a stark contrast to Chicago's crowded streets. Owen glanced at her, catching the genuine wonder in her expression. "Wait until you see it in spring when the wildflowers bloom," he said. "Like God spilled a paint box across the prairie." The journey to the ranch took most of the day, giving Darcy time to study her new employer. Owen Hayes wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, but his features were strong and honest: a straight nose, firm jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes the color of a summer sky. His hands, guiding the team of horses with confidence, bore the calluses and small scars of hard work. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Going on 4 years now. Started with just 20 acres and 6 head of cattle. Now I've got 160 acres and a herd of 50 with plans to expand." There was quiet pride in his voice. "It's not the biggest spread, but it's mine, free and clear." "That's impressive for a man your age," Darcy observed. Owen smiled. "I was fortunate. Won a bet against a man who didn't think I could break his meanest Mustang. The horse and 20 acres were my prize. The rest I built myself, with a lot of help from good neighbors and a few lucky breaks." As the afternoon wore on, Owen pointed out landmarks: the creek that never ran dry, even in summer drought, the old trapper's cabin, now abandoned, the trading post run by a former mountain man and his Arapaho wife. "There it is," he said finally, as they crested a gentle rise. "Hayes Ranch." Below them, nestled in a small valley protected by hills to the north and west, sat a modest but well-built house, a large barn and several outbuildings. A creek wound through the property, and fenced pastures stretched to the east. It wasn't grand, but to Darcy's eyes it looked like paradise after her recent trials. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. Owen's pleased expression told her the compliment had hit its mark. "It's home," he said simply, urging the team down the slope. As they approached, 3 men emerged from the barn, one older with graying hair, the others younger and of similar height. "That's Miguel Vasquez, my foreman," Owen explained, nodding toward the older man. "And the Peterson brothers, Nels and Lars. Good workers, all of them." The men watched curiously as Owen helped Darcy down from the wagon. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Reed. She'll be taking over as housekeeper. I expect you to show her the same respect you'd give your own mothers." Miguel stepped forward first, removing his hat. "Welcome to Hayes Ranch, Señorita. It will be good to have a woman's touch around here again." The Peterson brothers mumbled similar greetings, shuffling their feet awkwardly before offering to unload the supplies. "I'll show you the house," Owen said, guiding Darcy toward the 2-story structure. The main house was simply furnished but well built, with a large kitchen and dining area, a comfortable sitting room with a stone fireplace, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. The promised room off the kitchen proved to be small but cozy, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window that looked out on the kitchen garden. "It's not fancy," Owen said, sounding almost apologetic. "It's perfect," Darcy assured him, setting her carpetbag on the bed. After the jail cell, it felt like a palace. "I'll let you get settled," he said. "Supper's usually at 6, but given it's your first day, we can fend for ourselves if you need time." Darcy squared her shoulders. "I'll have supper ready at 6, Mr. Hayes. It's why you hired me, after all." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Owen," he corrected gently. "Mr. Hayes makes me look around for my father." "Owen, then," she conceded. "And you may call me Darcy, though the men should probably stick with Miss Reed for now." He nodded, lingering at the doorway for a moment as if wanting to say more, before finally turning away. "I'll be in the barn if you need anything." Left alone, Darcy unpacked her meager belongings, 2 dresses besides the one she wore, a nightgown, undergarments, and a few personal items, including a small daguerreotype of her parents and a well-worn copy of Jane Eyre. The similarity to her literary heroine's circumstances wasn't lost on her, though she firmly pushed away any romantic notions. This was a job, nothing more, and Owen Hayes was her employer, not a brooding Rochester. After freshening up with water from the pitcher on the washstand, Darcy explored the kitchen, taking inventory of the supplies. There was plenty of flour, sugar, coffee, and dried beans. The pantry held preserves and canned vegetables, and a smokehouse attached to the back porch contained hams, bacon, and dried beef. It was better stocked than she'd expected, and she quickly planned a hearty meal of ham, cornbread, and preserved peaches. By 6 o'clock, the aroma of fresh bread and sizzling ham filled the house. Darcy had found a checkered tablecloth in a drawer and set the large kitchen table with mismatched but clean plates and utensils. She was stirring gravy when boots stomped on the porch, followed by the sound of men washing up at the basin outside. Owen entered first, his hair damp from washing and his face clean-shaven. He stopped short at the sight of the table and the steaming platters of food. "This looks amazing," he said, his appreciation evident. "I think we've been eating off tin plates for the last month." The other men filtered in, equally impressed, and soon they were seated around the table, passing dishes and complimenting the food. Darcy, unaccustomed to such appreciation, felt a warm glow of satisfaction. "Where did you learn to cook like this, Miss Reed?" Nels Peterson asked, helping himself to a second serving of cornbread. "My mother taught me," she answered, surprised by how easy it was to talk to these rough but respectful men. "Before that, I helped in the kitchen of the orphanage where I grew up." A momentary silence fell, broken by Miguel's gentle, "The orphanage, it was in Chicago," Darcy nodded. "After my parents died of influenza when I was 16, I had nowhere else to go. When I turned 18, I found work as a seamstress, but then the fire came." She trailed off, the memories still painful. "The Great Fire," Owen said quietly. "You lost everything." "Everything but what I could carry," she confirmed. "I used my savings for a ticket west. I'd heard there were opportunities for women willing to work." Lars, the younger Peterson brother, shook his head sympathetically. "Tough break, ending up in jail right off." Darcy's chin lifted slightly. "It won't happen again." "No," Owen agreed, his blue eyes meeting hers across the table. "It won't." The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Darcy rose before dawn to start breakfast for the men, who headed out to their ranch duties as the sun crested the eastern horizon. She spent her days cleaning, baking, mending clothes, and gradually bringing order to a household that had clearly been without a woman's touch for too long. Owen was often busy with ranch work, but he made a point of checking in with her daily, asking if she needed anything from town and sometimes bringing small tokens, a bolt of fabric he'd picked up at the trading post, wildflowers he'd gathered while checking fence lines, a book borrowed from Sheriff Jenkins that he thought she might enjoy. These small kindnesses touched Darcy in ways she hadn't expected. Having been alone for so long, dependent only on herself, the sense of being cared for even in such simple ways was both unfamiliar and warming. 2 weeks after her arrival, a fierce autumn storm blew in from the mountains, bringing driving rain and howling winds that rattled the windows. The men came in from their work soaked and chilled, grateful for the hearty stew and hot coffee Darcy had ready. "Weather like this, no sense in trying to work outside tomorrow," Owen announced over dinner. "Miguel, you and the boys can catch up on repairs in the barn. Darcy, is there anything around the house that needs fixing?" She hesitated, reluctant to add to his workload. "The window in my room has a draft, but it's nothing serious." "I'll look at it after supper," he promised. Later, as rain lashed against the house, Owen knelt by her bedroom window, examining the frame. "The wood's warped a bit. I can fix it properly when the weather clears, but for now." He wedged a piece of cloth into the gap, stemming the worst of the draft. "That's much better," Darcy said, standing nearby with a lamp. "Thank you." Owen straightened, suddenly seeming very tall in the small room. For the first time, Darcy was acutely aware of his presence as a man rather than merely an employer. He smelled of rain and wood smoke, and there was a gentleness in his eyes that made her heart beat a little faster. "You've made a real difference here, Darcy," he said quietly. "The place feels like a home again." "I'm glad," she replied, equally soft. "I've enjoyed it more than I expected to." He seemed about to say more when a particularly violent gust rattled the house, making them both jump. The moment broken, Owen bid her good night and retreated to his own room upstairs. Darcy sat on her bed for a long time after he left, listening to the storm and trying to make sense of the unfamiliar emotions stirring within her. She'd promised herself she wouldn't be foolish about her employer, wouldn't read more into his kindness than was there, but something was shifting between them, as subtle and inevitable as the changing seasons. The storm lingered for 3 days, keeping everyone close to the ranch house. Darcy taught the men to play checkers in the evenings, laughing as the normally stoic Lars revealed a competitive streak that had him challenging everyone repeatedly. Owen watched these interactions with quiet pleasure, often catching Darcy's eye across the room with a smile that seemed meant only for her. On the morning the storm finally cleared, Darcy ventured outside to assess the damage to her kitchen garden. The wind had flattened some of her late plantings, but many had survived. She was kneeling to straighten a row of kale when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw a rider coming down the path from town, a woman, to her surprise, dressed in a fine blue riding habit. As the visitor drew closer, Darcy recognized her as Olivia Wentworth, the banker's daughter, whom she'd glimpsed in Fort Lyon on her one trip back to town with Owen. "Hello," Olivia called, guiding her dappled mare to a halt near Darcy. "You must be Miss Reed. I've been eager to make your acquaintance." Darcy stood, brushing soil from her apron, suddenly conscious of her work dress and wind-blown hair next to Olivia's polished appearance. "Yes, I'm Darcy Reed. Mr. Hayes isn't at the house right now. He's checking the herd after the storm." "Oh, I know," Olivia replied with an easy smile, dismounting gracefully. "I saw him in the east pasture and he said I should come up to the house. I've brought some things for you, actually." Surprised, Darcy led the woman to the porch. Olivia untied a package from her saddle and presented it to Darcy. "Father mentioned you arrived in Fort Lyon with very little. I thought you might appreciate some essentials: thread, needles, hairpins, and the like. Owen mentioned you were a seamstress." "That's very kind," Darcy said, touched by the unexpected gesture as she accepted the package. "Won't you come in for coffee?" Over coffee and leftover biscuits, Olivia proved to be warm and talkative. "Owen's been a good friend to our family for years," she explained. "When Father first opened the bank, many people were skeptical, but Owen was one of the first to deposit his earnings and encourage others to do the same. He seems well respected in the community," Darcy observed. "Oh, very much so." "There was quite a bit of talk when he paid your fine and brought you out here," Olivia said, then immediately looked chagrined. "I'm sorry, that was terribly forward of me." Darcy stiffened slightly. "I imagine there was. People do love to gossip." "They do," Olivia agreed, but Owen put a stop to the worst of it. He made it very clear at church the Sunday after you arrived that you were a respectable woman who'd fallen on hard times, and anyone suggesting otherwise would answer to him. She smiled. You should have seen old Mrs. Fitzwilliam's face. She's the worst gossip in 3 counties, and she closed her mouth so fast I thought she might swallow her teeth. The thought of Owen defending her reputation so publicly warmed Darcy to her core. He didn't tell me that. He wouldn't. Owen's not one to boast about doing the right thing. Olivia tilted her head, studying Darcy. He speaks very highly of you, you know, says you've transformed the place. Before Darcy could respond, the door opened and Owen himself appeared, looking surprised to find the 2 women chatting like old friends. Livy, I see you found Miss Reed, he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. I did, Olivia confirmed, rising. And I should be getting back before Father sends out a search party. It was lovely to meet you properly, Darcy. I hope you'll visit us in town sometime. After Olivia departed, Owen helped himself to coffee, his expression unreadable. She seems very nice, Darcy ventured, and very fond of you. Owen looked up, surprised. Livy, we grew up together. Her father's been like an uncle to me since my parents died. She mentioned you defended my reputation in town, Darcy said, studying his reaction. A flush crept up his neck. People have no right to judge what they don't understand. Thank you, she said simply. It means a great deal to me. He met her eyes then, something warm and unguarded in his gaze. You've earned respect, Darcy. I just made sure people knew it. That evening, after the men had retired to the bunkhouse, Darcy sat by the fire mending one of Owen's shirts. He entered the sitting room with 2 cups of coffee, handing one to her, before settling into the chair opposite. I've been thinking, he said after a comfortable silence. The Harvest Festival is coming up in Fort Lyon. Would you like to go? Darcy looked up from her stitching, surprised. Won't people talk if we attend together? Let them, he said with a dismissive shrug. Besides, Miguel and the Peterson boys will be there too. We always close up the ranch for the day. The prospect of a festival, music, dancing, food that she hadn't had to cook herself was tempting. I'd like that, she admitted, though I don't have anything suitable to wear. I'm sure Olivia would be happy to help with that. She's been wanting a reason to visit again. And so it was arranged. Olivia arrived the following week with patterns and fabric, and the 2 women spent a pleasant afternoon planning a new dress for Darcy. The banker's daughter proved to be a talented seamstress herself, and under her guidance, Darcy created a gown of deep green calico that complemented her eyes and chestnut hair. On the day of the Harvest Festival, the entire ranch was in high spirits. The men wore their Sunday best, and Owen appeared in a clean white shirt, dark vest, and his least worn pair of denims. When Darcy emerged in her new dress, her hair arranged in a simple but elegant style Olivia had shown her, Owen's appreciative gaze made her cheeks warm. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm to help her into the wagon. Fort Lyon was transformed for the festival. Bunting and paper lanterns decorated the main street, and tables laden with food lined the area near the church. A platform had been erected for dancing, and a small band was already playing lively tunes. Darcy was nervous at first, acutely aware of the curious glances from townsfolk. But Olivia immediately swept over to greet them, introducing Darcy to a circle of friends who welcomed her warmly. Owen stayed close by, a reassuring presence, occasionally resting his hand lightly on the small of her back as they navigated the crowded street. "Look at that pie," he murmured, nodding toward a table where women were arranging baked goods for judging. "Reminds me of the ones my mother used to make." "Apple," Darcy guessed, noting his wistful expression. "Apple with a hint of cinnamon and nutmeg," he confirmed. She won the contest 3 years running before she passed. Darcy made a mental note to try replicating the recipe. "How old were you when you lost her?" 15, he replied. "Father followed 2 years later. They're buried on a hill overlooking the ranch I'll show you sometime." The casual mention of a future beyond her 3-month trial period sent a flutter through Darcy's chest. "I'd like that," she said softly. As the afternoon wore on, they sampled harvest offerings, watched the children's sack races, and applauded the winners of various contests. When the dancing began in earnest, Owen turned to her with an outstretched hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Reed?" Darcy hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. "I'm not very practiced," she warned. His smile was gentle. "Neither am I. We'll learn together." The band struck up a waltz, and Owen guided her onto the dance floor with surprising grace for a man who spent most of his days on horseback. His hand was warm at her waist, and as he led her through the steps, Darcy felt herself relaxing into the movement, trusting his lead. "You're a natural," he said, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're a good teacher," she countered, then laughed as he twirled her unexpectedly. They danced 3 more dances before taking a break for lemonade. As they stood at the edge of the dancing area, Darcy became aware of a commotion nearby. A man's angry voice rose above the music, slurring with obvious drunkenness. "That's her, the jailbird. Hayes's fancy piece from the lockup." Darcy froze, the cup of lemonade nearly slipping from her fingers as a burly man with a florid face pointed in her direction. The crowd around them quieted, heads turning to stare. Owen stepped slightly in front of her, his posture tense. "That's enough, Barker. You're drunk and making a fool of yourself." "Am I wrong?" the man challenged, swaying slightly. "Everybody knows you bought yourself a pretty little housekeeper from the jail, but she does more than cook and clean, don't she?" Darcy felt the blood drain from her face as titters and whispers spread through the onlookers. All her fears about coming to the festival seemed justified in that horrible moment. Before Owen could respond, Sheriff Jenkins appeared, pushing through the crowd. "That's enough, Barker. Time for you to sleep it off." "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Barker protested as the sheriff took his arm firmly. "Hayes thinks his money lets him do whatever he pleases, including buying women." Owen's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained controlled. "Miss Reed is an employee who has earned the respect of everyone at my ranch. Your implications say more about your character than hers." As the sheriff dragged the protesting man away, Darcy felt a gentle touch on her arm. Olivia stood beside her, concern in her eyes. "Don't give him another thought," she said loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Joseph Barker hasn't been sober since his wife left him last spring. No one takes him seriously." The band, sensing the tension, struck up a lively reel, and gradually the crowd's attention drifted back to the festivities. But the damage was done. Darcy could feel the speculative glances, hear the hushed conversations behind raised hands. "I'd like to go home," she said quietly to Owen. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. I'll get the wagon." The ride back to the ranch was mostly silent, the earlier joy of the day tarnished by Barker's cruel words. Miguel and the Peterson brothers, sensing the shift in mood, rode ahead, leaving Owen and Darcy alone with their thoughts. "I'm sorry," Owen said finally, as the lights of Fort Lyon faded behind them. "Barker had no right to speak to you that way." "He only said what others were thinking," Darcy replied, her voice strained. "Perhaps I was foolish to think I could overcome my introduction to this community." Owen reined the horses to a stop, turning to face her fully in the moonlight. "No one who knows you could think those things, Darcy. You've proven yourself a dozen times over to anyone whose opinion matters." "Have I?" she asked, fighting tears. "Or have I just been hiding from reality at the ranch? I'm still the woman who was jailed for vagrancy, still dependent on your charity." "It's not charity," he said firmly. "You earn your keep and then some. And as for what happened in Fort Lyon, that's in the past. You're not defined by your worst day." His sincerity was almost harder to bear than Barker's cruelty. Darcy looked away, unable to meet the intensity of his gaze. "I should never have come to the festival. It was a mistake." "The mistake was mine," Owen said quietly. "I should have anticipated Barker might be there. He's had a grudge against me since I outbid him on a parcel of land last year. So I was just caught in the crossfire of an old rivalry. Somehow that made it worse." "No, that's not what I meant." Owen ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Darcy, look at me." Reluctantly, she met his eyes. "I wanted to take you to the festival because I'm proud to be seen with you, because in the short time you've been at the ranch, you've become important to me. More important than I expected." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to voice. Darcy's heart pounded as she searched his face, finding nothing but earnest sincerity there. "You've become important to me too," she whispered, the truth of it surprising her even as she spoke the words. For a moment, it seemed he might kiss her. Instead, he reached for her hand, squeezing it gently before releasing the brake and urging the horses forward once more. The ranch was quiet when they arrived, Miguel and the brothers having already retired to the bunkhouse. Owen helped Darcy down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Get some rest," he said softly. "Things will look brighter in the morning." But the morning brought unexpected complications. Darcy had just finished setting bread dough to rise when a rider approached the ranch Sheriff Jenkins, looking grim. "Morning, Darcy," he greeted her, removing his hat as she met him on the porch. "Is Owen around?" "He's in the barn," she replied, wiping flour from her hands. "Is something wrong?" "Might be," Jenkins said evasively. "Best if I talk to him directly." Owen appeared from the barn, alerted by the arrival of a visitor. Seeing the sheriff, his expression turned serious. "Jenkins, what brings you out here?" "Let's talk inside," the lawman suggested with a meaningful glance at Darcy. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of Miss Reed," Owen replied firmly. Jenkins sighed, replacing his hat. "It's about Joseph Barker. He's filing charges against you." "Charges?" Owen repeated incredulously. "For what?" "Assault. Claims you struck him after the festival last night." "That's absurd," Darcy interjected. "We left immediately after his outburst. Owen never laid a hand on him." The sheriff nodded. "I figured as much. Barker's sporting a nasty bruise this morning, but my guess is he got it falling down drunk after I put him out of the festival." "Then why are you here?" Owen asked. "Because Barker's father-in-law is Judge Thornton, and he's insisting I investigate." Jenkins looked apologetic. "I need you to come into town and make a formal statement. Clear this up proper-like." Owen's jaw tightened. "When?" "Today, if possible. Judge is only in Fort Lyon until tomorrow." After a moment's consideration, Owen nodded. "I'll come now, get it over with." "Darcy, would you let Miguel know I've gone to town? I should be back by supper." But Owen didn't return by supper. As darkness fell, Darcy found herself pacing the front porch, straining her eyes for any sign of riders on the moonlit road. The men had finished their meal and retired to the bunkhouse, leaving her alone with her worries. When she finally heard hoofbeats, her relief was palpable until she realized it was a single rider, moving at a brisk trot. Sheriff Jenkins, alone. "Where's Owen?" she demanded as soon as he dismounted. Jenkins removed his hat, his expression grave. "Judge Thornton decided to hold him overnight. Trial set for tomorrow morning." "Trial?" Darcy echoed, disbelieving. "This is ridiculous. Owen didn't assault anyone." "I know that, and you know that," Jenkins said wearily. "But Barker's got his father-in-law convinced otherwise. And Thornton's had it in for Owen ever since he testified against the judge's cousin in that land fraud case last year." Darcy's mind raced. "So this is just about petty revenge?" "Pretty much. Owen will probably get a fine, maybe a night or two in jail at worst, but Thornton's enjoying making him sweat." "This is my fault," Darcy said, sinking onto the porch step. "If I hadn't been at the festival—" "Don't you start that," Jenkins interrupted firmly. "Barker would have found another excuse. He's been looking for a way to get at Owen for months." "What can I do?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Jenkins considered her thoughtfully. "Be in court tomorrow, 9 o'clock sharp. Your testimony about what really happened might help, especially since you're the supposedly wronged party in Barker's story." After the sheriff departed, Darcy sought out Miguel in the bunkhouse, explaining the situation and insisting on riding to town first thing in the morning. The foreman agreed immediately, promising to escort her himself. "The boss is a good man," Miguel said as he walked her back to the house. "He will be all right." Darcy barely slept that night, her mind filled with worry. By dawn, she was dressed in her best dress, the green one from the festival, with her hair neatly arranged. Miguel had the horses saddled when she emerged from the house. "You can ride?" he asked, eyeing her dress. "Side saddle," she confirmed, "though it's been a while." The journey to Fort Lyon seemed interminable, though Miguel set a brisk pace. They arrived at the courthouse, really just a large room above the general store, just as the clock struck 9. The room was already crowded, news of the trial having spread through town. Owen sat at a small table near the front, his back straight and his expression neutral. He turned at the sound of the door opening, his eyes finding Darcy immediately. The relief in his gaze made her heart clench. Judge Thornton, a stern-faced man with mutton chop whiskers, called the court to order as Darcy and Miguel found seats near the back. Joseph Barker was called first, telling a dramatic tale of being confronted by Owen after the festival and struck without provocation. "And why would Mr. Hayes assault you?" the judge asked, though his tone suggested he already believed Barker's story. "Because of what I said about his woman," Barker replied, pointing at Darcy. "The truth hurt his pride, I reckon." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom, and Darcy felt the weight of stares. But she held her head high, refusing to be cowed. When it was Owen's turn to testify, he spoke clearly and calmly. "I never touched Joseph Barker. After his outburst at the festival, Miss Reed and I left immediately. We went directly back to the ranch, where my foreman and 2 hands can confirm we arrived well before Barker claims I assaulted him." "Convenient that your employees would alibi you," Judge Thornton remarked dryly. "I can call Miss Reed to testify," Owen suggested. The judge's eyes narrowed. "The testimony of a woman with a criminal record hardly seems reliable." "I object to that characterization," Owen said sharply. "Miss Reed was briefly held for vagrancy, a charge that was dismissed upon payment of a fine." Thornton waved a dismissive hand. "Nevertheless, as she is in your employ and clearly beholden to you, her testimony would be suspect." Darcy could stand it no longer. Rising to her feet, she spoke clearly. "I request permission to address the court, Your Honor." The judge seemed taken aback by her boldness. "This is highly irregular. So is conducting a trial based on false accusations and personal vendettas," Darcy countered. "I was with Mr. Hayes from the moment Mr. Barker made his unpleasant remarks until we reached the ranch. At no point did Mr. Hayes strike anyone or even speak to Mr. Barker after the sheriff removed him." Thornton's face reddened. "Young woman, you will sit down or be held in contempt." "I believe I might be of assistance, Judge." A new voice entered the fray as Olivia Wentworth rose from her seat near the front. "I was also present at the festival, and can confirm that Mr. Hayes and Miss Reed departed immediately following Mr. Barker's outburst." "As can I," added another voice, Dr. Morrison, the town physician. "Furthermore, I examined Mr. Barker this morning. The bruise on his face is consistent with a fall, not a blow from a fist. Given his state of intoxication last night, I believe he simply doesn't remember how he was injured." The courtroom erupted in murmurs again, and Judge Thornton banged his gavel for order. Barker was looking increasingly uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact. "Is there anything else you wish to add, Mr. Hayes?" the judge asked stiffly. Owen stood. "Only that I find it curious that a man who was so thoroughly inebriated that the sheriff had to remove him from a public gathering would have such clear recollections of events that never occurred." For a long moment, Judge Thornton surveyed the courtroom, clearly realizing that public opinion had shifted against Barker's tale. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Given the testimony provided, and the lack of corroborating witnesses for the plaintiff's account, I find insufficient evidence to proceed with this case. Charges against Owen Hayes are hereby dismissed." He banged his gavel with finality, adding, "Mr. Barker, I suggest you examine your conscience before bringing such serious accusations in the future." The relief that washed over Darcy was so intense that she felt momentarily lightheaded. As the crowd dispersed, Owen made his way to where she stood with Miguel. "Thank you for coming," he said simply, his eyes conveying far more than his words. "Of course I came," she replied. "I couldn't let you face this alone." Something in her tone must have reached him, for his expression softened and he reached for her hand, squeezing it briefly before releasing it. "I need to thank Olivia and Dr. Morrison," he said. "Then we can head home." The ride back to the ranch was significantly lighter in spirit than their journey to town had been. Miguel rode ahead, tactfully giving them privacy. "I was worried," Darcy admitted, watching Owen's profile against the autumn sky, "when you didn't come home last night." "I'm sorry for that," he said. "I didn't want you to worry." "It seems I can't help worrying about you," she said softly. "You've become rather important to me, Mr. Hayes." He glanced at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Have I?" she nodded, suddenly shy. "More than I expected." "More than is proper, perhaps." Owen reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her fully. "Darcy Reed, there is nothing improper about caring for someone who cares for you in return." Her breath caught. "And do you care for me?" "More than I can say," he admitted. "These past weeks, having you at the ranch, it's like the place finally became the home I always wanted it to be. You brought warmth and life back to it, back to me." The tenderness in his voice made her eyes sting with unshed tears. "I never expected to find a home here. When you paid my fine and offered me a job, I thought it was just charity or worse. And now," he prompted gently, "now I know it was the best thing that ever happened to me." She smiled tremulously. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." Owen dismounted in a fluid motion, then helped her down from her horse. Standing close together on the dusty road, with the ranch visible in the distance, he took both her hands in his. "I know this is fast," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "We've only known each other a short time. But I think sometimes, when it's right, you just know." He paused, searching her face. "I love you, Darcy Reed. I think I started falling for you the moment you looked at me through those jail cell bars with more dignity than most free women possess." Darcy felt tears spill onto her cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been fighting it, telling myself it was foolish, that you could never see me as anything but the woman you rescued. I see you," he interrupted gently, brushing away her tears with his thumbs. "I see your strength, your kindness, your determination. I see the woman I want to build a life with if she'll have me. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Darcy's heart hammered in her chest. Owen smiled. Not yet. I want to court you properly first, no rushing, no rumors, no doubts for either of us. But someday soon, if you'll allow it, I intend to ask you to be my wife. I would like that very much, she managed, her voice thick with emotion. He bent his head then, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt like a promise, tender, reverent, and full of hope for the future they might build together. Winter descended on the Colorado territory with a ferocity that kept everyone close to home. The ranch became a haven of warmth against the howling winds and driving snow, and within its walls, Owen and Darcy's relationship flourished. True to his word, Owen courted her properly, with small gifts, shared moments, and a respect that never wavered. By Christmas, it was common knowledge in Fort Lyon that Owen Hayes intended to marry his housekeeper, and the gossip that had once plagued Darcy had largely subsided. Olivia Wentworth had become a true friend and ally, inviting Darcy to social gatherings and introducing her to the better sort of people in town. On Christmas Eve, with the house decorated with pine boughs and candles, Owen gathered everyone, Miguel, the Peterson brothers, and Darcy around the fireplace after dinner. I have something to say, he announced, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. He turned to Darcy, taking her hand. When I paid your fine that day in Fort Lyon, I thought I was just hiring a housekeeper. I never expected to find the other half of my soul. Darcy felt tears threatening again as Owen reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Darcy Reed, he said, dropping to one knee before her, you've turned a house into a home and a lonely man into a hopeful one. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? The ring he offered was a simple gold band with a small pearl, modest but beautiful, just like their love. Yes, she whispered, her voice failing her as joy overwhelmed her. Yes, with all my heart. The wedding took place on a clear, cold February day, with Sheriff Jenkins giving the bride away and Olivia serving as maid of honor. The small church in Fort Lyon was filled with well-wishers, including Dr. Morrison, Mrs. Wilson from the boarding house, and even Judge Thornton, who had eventually recognized the injustice of the trial and made amends with Owen. As they exchanged vows, Darcy marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment, from a jail cell to a wedding altar, from destitution to belonging, from loneliness to love. I, Owen, take you, Darcy, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he promised, his voice clear and certain. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. When she repeated the same vows, Darcy felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. The gold band slid onto her finger, a tangible symbol of the commitment they were making to each other. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Reverend Thomas declared. You may kiss your bride. Owen's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, and the cheers that erupted around them seemed to herald the beginning of their new life together. The years that followed were not without challenges. Drought threatened the ranch one summer, and a particularly harsh winter claimed several cattle the next. But through it all, Owen and Darcy faced each obstacle as partners, their bond growing stronger with every trial overcome. In the spring of 1873, their joy was multiplied with the birth of their first child, a son they named Thomas, after Owen's father. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, Elizabeth, named for Darcy's mother. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, growing strong and curious under the loving guidance of their parents. Miguel Vasquez remained a loyal foreman and became godfather to both children. The Peterson brothers eventually saved enough to start a small ranch of their own nearby, though they still helped with cattle drives and remained close friends. On the 5th anniversary of the day Owen had paid Darcy's fine, he surprised her with a special gift, the deed to the land upon which they had built their life, officially amended to include her name alongside his as equal owner. "It was always as much yours as mine," he said, watching her trace her name on the document with wonder. "You transformed it from a place I worked to a place I belonged." Darcy looked up at him, her green eyes shining with the same quiet strength that had first caught his attention through iron bars all those years ago. "And you transformed me from someone with nowhere to go to someone who was finally home." Outside, the Colorado sunset painted the prairie in hues of gold and crimson, a fitting backdrop to a love that had begun in the unlikeliest of circumstances, but had grown into something as vast and enduring as the western landscape itself. In the years that followed, the Hayes Ranch prospered, becoming known throughout the territory for its fine cattle and generous hospitality. Travelers passing through often remarked on the unusual harmony of the place, a harmony born of the deep love between the rancher and the woman he'd once found behind bars, whose dignity in adversity had captured his heart. And whenever anyone asked how they had met, Owen would simply smile and say, "She needed a chance, and I needed a home. We found both in each other,